Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Nexus and the MIT libraries. My name is Mark Sarko, and I'm a librarian here in Hayden, and I will be introducing tonight's speaker. So, Eric Robsky Huntley is a spatial data scientist, GIS analyst, and geographer. At MIT, Eric is a lecturer in urban science and planning in DUSP, director of the Spatial Analysis and Action Research Group, and lead systems engineer for the Data and Feminism Lab. They are also founder and principal of OGRAPHIES Research and Design, a mission-driven GIS, mapping, and spatial data science consultancy. Eric is interested in what they call, quote, mapping up, which involves using data science and mapping methods to analyze dominant actors and institutions. Their current research focuses on identifying shared ownership of property-owning LLCs in Massachusetts using spatial network analysis and building interactive tools and visualizations to make this information accessible to tenants, activists, and local governments. Please join me and welcome Eric Robsky Huntley.
Thanks for being here, y'all. I'm glad some of you have moved up. I was about to do a bit where I refused to speak unless some of you did. And I can't do that bit anymore, so thanks. We'll just knock that off the list. So this is sort of an interesting format. Yeah, sure. This is an interesting format in the sense that I am kind of introducing a film before you see it, meaning that I don't want to. I'm not going to give you a critique of the film because I want you to form your own opinions. You don't know what you think of it yet. If I reference things that are actually in the film, you may or may not hold them in your head until they show up. So I think what I'm going to try to do here is kind of, in relatively abstract and open ways, try to give you things to key into as you watch the film that might change the way you view it. Because I think that we're looking at an artifact in such a rapidly changing landscape that much of this film, even though it came out 2 years ago, it's only 2 years old, already reads as being somewhat out of date for reasons that are both probably going to be obvious to you and those that might not be quite so obvious. So the first thing that I would say is that I sat down to watch it last night. I am last minute perpetually, and I was sitting there with my partner and we were watching this film. And the thing that jumped out at me first was that it was falling really heavily on a trope that many of us probably remember from the months after ChatGPT first launched. ChatGPT, any nerds in the room? ChatGPT beta, the platform, the tool went live when, approximately? Anyone? I'm so glad you don't actually know that. Thank you. That's good. You pass. ChatGPT went public in the sense of the tool becoming available November 30th, 2022. By January, it had hit 100 million users. And so around between November and January was when we started to see this particular thing emerge. And the thing I'm referring to is this. You begin reading an article. You sit down to watch a film. It unfolds in a film, it might be a minute. In an article, it might be 2 paragraphs. And then at the end of that second paragraph, record scratch, what if I told you this was actually AI? Right? Where the grand reveal was that you've been engaging with this tool this entire time, whether you knew it or not. And throughout this film, you see fairly extensive use of, at this point, relatively, again, it shocks me that I have to say this, but slightly out of date, generative AI models producing imagery. So for example, we see what AI thinks that, say, forced Uyghur laborers in Western China might look like when they're returning from the lithium mines. Right? We're seeing what it might look like to be in a what it might look like to be in a data labeling workplace where we're led to assume relatively vulnerable populations in, say, sub-Saharan Africa are labeling exploitative visuals that are posted to the internet for Meta, whatever it is, one of the big tech companies. So it falls back really hard on this what I think of as kind of a dated gimmick, where it shows you AI and you're left in a really mystified place where you don't know exactly how to engage with it. It's an image. It's speaking to you in a way that is recognizable as an image. You're engaging with it in a way that is close to how you might engage with the real thing, the actual artifact, the actual photograph, whatever it is, but you're at a distance from it. And I think I have some questions actually about how the film uses sort of these AI-generated images, but I actually want you to think about how you respond, right? How do you understand your ethical obligation in a way that is affected by the use of AI to produce these images, as opposed to what would be more traditional journalistic practice of, embedding, doing these kind of long-term trust building journalistic or ethnographic approaches, and really kind of coming from a place of more grounded research in the course of filmmaking or writing. Another question that I have, okay, so I'm a geographer. I am a GI scientist, which is geographic information scientist. And what that means is I'm in some ways a cartographer. How many of you have met a cartographer before? Right. Ah, yes, I know. Wonderful. Okay, so in the film, much of your narration is going to be carried forward by, not the narration, much of the sort of argumentative arc of the film is going to be carried forward by a self-described cartographer. We meet this guy named Vladan Joler. I can't read my own writing. It could be one of the two. His role in the film is to take us through the sort of, you could say, the back end in some ways. He's being given the task of saying, this tool that you see, this robot that's in front of you, this interface that's presenting itself, it's actually, when you run a query, when you give ChatGPT a prompt, right? When you give DeepSeek a prompt, how does that relate to the entire universe of things that sit behind the technology, right? So how does your prompt to ChatGPT trace outward through your sort of standard HTTP requests, and actually muster forth this whole world of resources, of metals and labor and blood and all of these things that go into, however quietly, the tech we use in our daily lives. And I'd encourage you to think about the fact that this is a self-described cartographer. Cartography is map making, right? Cartography is, right, cartography, so it's drawing the world, writing the world. Actually, geography is writing the world. Cartography would be writing the sheet, actually. It's sort of a strange word for what it is. But but it's a map maker, right? And in the sense that we're dealing with these maps that exceed sort of your traditional latitude, longitude pieces of traditional map making, I'd really kind of encourage you to think about how you think about the interaction between tooling and supply chains and technology. I think the thing that the film is fairly successful at is drawing out really how these individual pieces of technology trace immediately outwards into these enormous networks of resource and the like. And then I guess the last thing that I wanted to say, and maybe this is where it starts to feel the most dated to me, is the implications that it traces it feels a little constrained, actually. It deals with the supply chains, right? So where do the rare earth metals and lithium and these sorts of things that go into NVIDIA chips and whatever it is, where do they come from? Who extracts the metal? Who refines it? Who labels the data sets? These sorts of questions. It doesn't really get, and I think this is the 2023 part, it doesn't get into the downstream effects on 2025 labor markets in developed and elite economies. I don't know how many of you have been watching the job outlook for CS graduates recently. it's not what it once was. And for me, one of the fascinating things about AI in the past year in particular has been watching how it's reshaped a lot of these previously rarefied labor markets, to the point that actually we're starting to see some ripple effects where junior developers, while they're not being entirely replaced by AIs by any stretch of the imagination, sufficient quantities of that work are doable by AI that they are hiring fewer at slower rates, and the responsibilities are shifting to editing existing code rather than writing novel code at the very sort of simple, when you're doing very simple things in the course of developing a code base. And then I think, frankly, I don't know, and this is maybe my own thing. I was watching this documentary, and this is maybe a very like public TMI place to say this. My partner's pregnant, and I was sort of like scanning outward. Right? I've been thinking very very futurity saturated kind of way recently, and I've had a switch flip in the last 6 months on AI in general, where I've gone from being a skeptic to being actually, frankly, kind of a doomer. I'm becoming less and less open to the idea that there's much good that comes out of consumer-facing AI. I'm really fairly skeptical of a lot of this, and I don't. My take on it has suddenly started to be much more like, well, if it doesn't say what it says it can do, we probably shouldn't invest in it, and if it does say what it says it can do, we definitely shouldn't invest in it. And that's sort of become my position to some extent, frankly. I guess to me, I've started to this film, like so many things in the ether, puts me in mind of a class that I've always wanted to teach at MIT, and I don't think it really belongs in my department. But if someone is a department head and is interested in this, let me know. I can do it. I don't know. I'll do it for free. I've wanted forever to teach a class at MIT that's just called "What If We Didn't?" Alternative title, nah. And the premise of the class would be taking very seriously that the best thing to do with a piece of technology would actually be to not do anything with it at all. In STS, this is sometimes referred to as the inevitability hypothesis, right? That the minute something comes out of Pandora's box, it can't be put back in. There's nothing we can do to refuse it. And I actually think this is a moment where we're at something like a really historical turning point, and maybe the best path forward is to find these little ways of just frankly refusing. Enrolling in my class called "What If We Didn't?" The thing I wanted to close with, I have a favorite Aesop Rock song. He's a rapper, this is from a song called "Mindful Solutionism," and it goes like this: you could get a robot limb for your blown off limb. Later on, the same technology will automate your gig, as awesome as it is. Wait, it gets awful. You could split an atom willy-nilly. If it's energy that can be used for killing, then it will be. Landmines, Agent Orange, leaded gas, cigarettes, cameras in your favorite corners, plastic in the wilderness. We cannot be trusted with the stuff that we come up with. The machinery could eat us. We just really love our buttons. Technology? Focus on the other shit. 3D printed body parts, dehydrated onion dip. You can buy a jet ski from a cell phone on a jumbo jet. TECHNOLOGY, it's the ultimate. And he closes the song with a rousing chorus of, if it's out of the bag, then it's out of the bag. Now that is a powerful cat. This is a powerful cat. So thanks. I don't know. Are we ready? Let's do it.